Most men never realize the moment everything begins to change. It is not when a woman leaves, not when she becomes distant, and not even when she stops replying the way she used to. The real shift happens the moment a man finally understands his own value and stops begging for validation from someone who only keeps him around for attention. That is the moment the entire dynamic changes. There are men who spend years chasing approval. They overthink every text, every conversation, every delayed reply. They convince themselves that if they just try harder, become more available, or prove themselves enough, eventually the woman they want will suddenly appreciate them. But life rarely works that way. The harder a man chases someone who is emotionally unavailable, the more he slowly loses himself in the process. Some women are not looking for connection, they are looking for control. They enjoy attention because attention feeds their ego. They enjoy knowing someone is always waiting, always hoping, always ready to give more energy than they receive in return, and many men never notice the trap until they are emotionally exhausted. At first, everything feels exciting. She gives just enough affection to keep him invested. One day, she is warm and affectionate. The next, she becomes cold and distant. She replies quickly for a while, then suddenly disappears for hours or days. She acts interested, then pulls away the moment he gets too comfortable. This creates confusion, and confusion is powerful because it keeps a man emotionally attached. The average man reacts the same way almost every time. He starts trying harder. He sends longer messages. He becomes more available. He sacrifices his peace just to keep her attention. He thinks persistence will make her value him more. But in reality, desperation usually destroys attraction. The more he chases, the more power he gives away. Then one day something inside him changes. Maybe he becomes tired of feeling ignored. Maybe he realizes he has abandoned his own goals and self-respect. Maybe he finally understands that constantly proving his worth to someone who enjoys emotional games is a battle he can never truly win. And for the first time, instead of chasing, he decides to step back. This is where the shift begins. At first, she may not take it seriously. She assumes he will come back like he always did before. She believes the silence is temporary. In her mind, men always return eventually, because most men fear losing the connection more than they value their own dignity. So she waits confidently, expecting another message, another attempt, another emotional reaction. But this time nothing comes. Days pass. The attention disappears. The constant validation fades away. Suddenly the energy she once controlled is gone, and that absence becomes impossible to ignore. She starts checking his social media more often. She notices he is no longer trying to impress her. She wonders why he seems calm without her presence. And for the first time, she feels uncertainty. That uncertainty slowly grows into discomfort. People often misunderstand this stage. They think she suddenly realizes she is deeply in love. Sometimes that may happen, but many times what she truly misses is the emotional certainty he used to provide. She misses knowing someone was always there waiting for her. She misses the feeling of being desired without effort. She misses the control she once had over the situation. And when that control disappears, it forces reflection. Now she starts paying closer attention. She replays conversations in her mind. She wonders whether she pushed too far. She starts questioning why the man she assumed would never leave suddenly seems completely fine without her. The silence becomes louder than any argument ever could. Meanwhile, the man who walked away begins changing too. At first it hurts. Walking away is never easy when genuine emotions were involved. But slowly, he begins reconnecting with himself. He focuses on his goals again. He spends more time building his confidence instead of chasing reassurance. He remembers what life felt like before his mood depended on someone else's attention. That is the part many people never talk about. Walking away is not about revenge. It is not about manipulating someone into returning. Real power comes from reclaiming your peace, your focus, and your self-respect. The strongest men are not the loudest or the most aggressive. They are the men who know when to stop investing energy into situations that slowly drain their spirit. And ironically, that quiet confidence often becomes the very thing that changes how others see them. Because the moment a man stops acting out of fear of losing someone, he becomes different. His energy changes. His decisions become calmer. He no longer needs constant reassurance to feel valuable. And people notice that shift immediately. The truth is simple. Nobody truly respects desperation for long. Real respect comes when someone sees that you value yourself enough to walk away from situations that no longer bring peace into your life. And once a man learns that lesson, he stops begging for attention and starts protecting his energy instead. As time passes, the emotional balance continues to shift in ways most people never expect. The man who once felt anxious every day slowly becomes calmer, while the person who once felt completely secure begins to feel uncertain. That reversal can be deeply unsettling because people often take consistent attention for granted until it disappears. When someone is used to always having access to your energy, your silence becomes louder than words. She starts wondering what changed. She notices you are no longer reacting emotionally to every little thing. You're not trying to force conversations. You're not posting things to get her attention. You are simply living your life without constantly orbiting around hers. That is when curiosity turns into self-doubt. At first, she may try to protect her ego by pretending none of it matters. She tells herself, you are just being dramatic or trying to prove a point. She assumes eventually you will break the silence and return the way you always did before. But when the days continue passing and your focus remains elsewhere, her confidence begins to weaken. This is where human psychology becomes powerful. People often value what feels difficult to replace. When attention is constantly available, it loses emotional weight. But when someone who genuinely cared suddenly stops chasing validation and begins prioritizing themselves, it creates emotional tension. She starts asking questions she never considered before. Did she push too hard? Did she misjudge your value? Did she assume your loyalty would last forever no matter how she behaved? Those questions can quietly consume someone because uncertainty creates obsession. The mind naturally focuses on unfinished emotional situations. That is why people often think more about the person who walked away peacefully than the person who begged to stay. Meanwhile, you begin noticing changes within yourself too. The emotional fog starts clearing. You sleep better. Your confidence slowly returns. Instead of spending hours analyzing mixed signals, you begin investing energy into your health, goals, work, friendships, and future. You remember what it feels like to live without constantly seeking approval, and that growth becomes visible. People can sense when someone genuinely values themselves. It shows in posture, tone, decisions, and emotional control. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop trying to convince people to choose you. You stop feeling the need to compete for attention. And that emotional stability becomes attractive because confidence rooted in self-respect always carries weight. This is often the moment when she reaches out again. Sometimes it begins subtly. A random message appears after weeks of silence. Maybe she reacts to one of your stories or finds an excuse to restart conversation. The message itself may seem casual, but emotionally it represents something much deeper. She is testing whether she still has access to you emotionally. And this is where many men make a mistake. The moment they receive attention again, they immediately fall back into old habits. They become overly available. They rush to respond. They abandon the emotional progress they worked hard to build. In doing so, they unintentionally recreate the same unhealthy dynamic that hurt them before. But a man who has truly changed responds differently. He no longer sees attention as proof of his worth. He no longer feels desperate to secure someone's validation. He understands that consistency, respect, honesty, and emotional maturity matter far more than temporary attraction or manipulation. If someone returns, he pays attention not only to their words, but also to their actions. Because real change is shown through behavior, not promises. Many people reappear in someone's life simply because they miss comfort, attention, or emotional security. That does not always mean they are prepared to build something healthy. Sometimes they simply miss the role you played in making them feel desired. Understanding that difference is important because emotional awareness protects you from repeating painful cycles. A strong man does not become cold or cruel after being hurt. He simply becomes more disciplined with his energy. He learns that protecting his peace is not selfish. He understands that not every connection deserves unlimited access to his emotions. And most importantly, he stops confusing emotional intensity with genuine love. Real relationships are not built on mind games, inconsistency, or emotional control. Healthy connection comes from mutual effort, trust, respect, and emotional safety. The strongest people are not those who manipulate others into chasing them. The strongest people are those who communicate honestly and walk away from situations that continuously damage their peace of mind. And once a man truly understands that, something changes permanently inside him. He no longer fears losing people who only valued him when he was easy to control. Instead, he begins building a life where his confidence comes from within rather than from someone else's attention. That is when emotional freedom begins. Eventually, the situation reaches a point where reality can no longer be avoided. The emotional games stop feeling exciting, the temporary distractions lose their effect, and both people are left facing the truth of what the connection actually was. For the woman, this can become the hardest stage of all. At first, she may try to move forward quickly. She posts more online, spends time with new people, and acts as though life has never been better. From the outside, everything appears perfect. But appearances are often designed to protect the ego, not reveal the truth. Deep down, she still remembers the man who stopped chasing her, not because he was perfect, but because he became emotionally unavailable in a way she did not expect. Human beings naturally remember what challenged them emotionally. The man who begged for attention becomes easy to forget because his actions communicated desperation. But the man who quietly walked away with dignity creates a different kind of impact. That memory stays alive because it forces reflection. She begins comparing new experiences to what she once had. The new attention may feel exciting at first, but excitement without depth fades quickly. Compliments become repetitive. Validation loses meaning when it comes too easily. And eventually, she notices that many people are willing to offer attention, but very few bring emotional strength, stability, and self-respect into a relationship. That realization can feel heavy. For a long time, she may have believed she always had the upper hand. She assumed you would always remain emotionally available no matter how inconsistent things became. But once someone truly moves on emotionally, there comes a moment when access can no longer be regained so easily, and that is often when regret finally appears. Not necessarily regret for losing control, but regret for failing to appreciate genuine effort while it was still present. At the same time, your own life continues evolving. You become less focused on proving yourself and more focused on building yourself. Your priorities shift. You stop measuring your worth through someone else's reactions. You understand that peace is more valuable than emotional chaos, even when chaos feels temporarily exciting. This is the lesson many men spend years trying to learn. Strength is not about dominating others emotionally. It is not about making someone jealous, manipulating emotions, or pretending not to care. Real strength is emotional discipline. It is the ability to remain grounded even when emotions are intense. It is the ability to walk away from unhealthy dynamics without hatred consuming you. And it is the ability to continue growing instead of becoming bitter. Because bitterness traps people just as much as desperation does. Some men leave relationships physically but remain emotionally trapped for years. They obsess over revenge, validation, or proving their value. But true freedom comes when you no longer need someone else's regret to heal your own wounds. The moment you stop needing closure from another person is the moment you fully reclaim your power. And strangely enough, that inner peace often becomes the very thing others notice most. Confidence built on self-respect feels different from confidence built on ego. Ego constantly needs validation. Self-respect does not. Ego wants to win every emotional battle. Self-respect simply wants peace, honesty, and stability. Once a man understands that difference, his entire approach to relationships changes. He no longer chases people who enjoy emotional confusion. He no longer ignores red flags just because someone is attractive. He no longer sacrifices his dignity for temporary affection. Instead, he becomes selective about who receives his time, energy, and emotional investment. That does not make him cold, it makes him wise. The healthiest relationships are built between two emotionally mature people who choose each other freely without manipulation, fear, or control. Love should never feel like a constant battle for attention. It should feel safe, balanced, and honest. And once someone experiences real emotional stability, they stop romanticizing toxic dynamics that once felt exciting. In the end, the biggest transformation is not about making someone come back. It is about becoming someone who no longer loses themselves trying to keep others from leaving. That is where real growth happens. Because when a man finally learns to value his own peace, he stops chasing validation and starts building a life rooted in confidence, purpose, and emotional clarity. And from that point forward, whether someone stays or leaves no longer defines his worth. That is true freedom.